Good afternoon, everyone. It's been a couple of weeks since I've been on live, but here I am today. What I want to talk to all of you today about is how we're all going with complying with the GDPR. Now that the GDPR is a thing, meaning that just because 5th of May was the deadline, it's not over. It is a process of compliance, and the regulators themselves say that it is something that is always going to be ongoing and developing for businesses at all levels, from the solopreneur through to the big corporations such as Facebook, Twitter, etc. What I want to just go through today is the role that you play in your privacy policy, because the privacy policy does actually deal with two specific roles in terms of the collection of personal information, and they are that of the data controller and the data processor, and I'll get to that in a minute. And the second thing that is I'd like to cover today is the fact that everyone you do business with, how to make sure that they're compliant as well, because at some point there is a possibility of information sharing in relation to personal information. So a quick refresh about the GDPR in case you don't already know, and some people, believe it or not, still it's still news to them. So the GDPR is a general data protection regulations that came into force on May 25th of this year, and it's kind of like a peak body now for compliance of how to manage personal information, the collection and the processing of information, and it affects all businesses, including us as small business owners, and it affects you if you have a website, basically, or if you're doing email marketing. So it's not about, do I only have clients in Australia? Do I only see clients in Australia? Do I only sell in Australia? What if I don't actively market in another part of the world? It's got nothing to do with that. What it does have to do is the fact you've got a website, and even though you may not be actively targeting people from the European Union states, you are still using cookies and analytics to collect personally identifiable information on your website for marketing and statistic purposes, which means that you are in effect collecting personal information from people that you really don't have any control over, that they're visiting your website. So your privacy policy, because of that, now needs to be GDPR compliant, and that compliance, so you may have had a privacy policy before that dealt with elements of the Australian privacy principles. The GDPR itself requires a certain structure and a certain form and content to the document to be compliant with the regulations. And I've seen a lot of privacy policies since May 21st that have come through, and it's really clear that, they have had very little regard to the regulations themselves. What they've done is made a lot of noise and made it a very, still quite a long, complex document. And one of the requirements of the GDPR is that it be very simple, very straightforward, very direct, and to be able to be understood by anybody over the age of 13. And it's not to be confusing, and it's not to be it's not to be in any way written in. It needs to be extremely straightforward, is what I'm saying. So look at your privacy policy, and I'd like to know how you're going with it. It's really important. So inside your privacy policy that is now GDPR compliant, and if it's not, you need to be working towards that. There are the regulations refer to the data controller and the data processor, and that's who the GDPR applies to within a business. You need to determine whether you are a data controller or a data processor. And I guess the question is, what does that even mean? you know, like their words. In terms of your business, a data controller is the person who, or the business or the entity that controls the means of collecting the personal information from people that they come into contact with for various reasons in their business. And they also control the purpose for which that information is collected. So the controller is all about how it's collected and why it's collected. The processor, on the other hand, processes the information collected by the controller at the direction of the controller. So there is a very close relationship between the two, but they are very different, and the GDPR applies to both of them, and your privacy policy requires you to address or identify who you are in the relationship. Are you a controller of data, or are you a processor of data? You may be both in your business, and you need to address that in your privacy policy when it's drafted. So in this live, which is quite a few minutes long, I want to address what it means to be either of those things. To an extent, I've already done that. So you need to remember that if all of us in small business who are using a email marketing platform and a website to collect information from people who deal with us, we are the data controllers. That data, the means of collecting that data and why we're collecting the data is controlled by us. The processor of information are the people or the organizations that process on our behalf. So it's our CRMs, it's the Acuities, the Trellos, the even Gmail, and the email marketing platforms are processors like MailChimp, Active Campaign, Infusionsoft. Okay, so what you need to be careful of is that you understand who you are in your privacy policy. Are you the data controller or are you the data processor? Because you need to be aware that there's a really important relationship between the two, and your data processor also has to be GDPR compliant. Otherwise, you have a problem. So why is it important to make sure that other people you work with are GDPR compliant? And I just want to say here that it's not always just the big companies, the MailChimps and the Active Campaign and Infusionsoft that I'm talking about, or other CRMs like HubSpot and Dubsado, etc. It could be as simple as you giving your email list to your VA to do something with that. So any businesses that you are conducting business with, it pays to ensure that they are GDPR compliant. It pays to ask the question, hey, are you GDPR compliant? I can't see your privacy policy on your website, and if they do have a privacy policy and you've had a look at it, or their terms and conditions, their agreements, where have they addressed the collection of personal information and the management of personal information in all of that? So I guess what I really want to put to you in this live as well is some easy, just a few things on how to keep a handle on the people you're working with and those businesses that are, or the software that you're using, and who's GDPR compliant, who is not. So the first thing I suggest to you is to create a spreadsheet and make a list of all your processes, everyone that you share information with. So at the top of the list will be people like, or organizations like your scheduling, i.e. Acuity, your CRM, i.e. Dubsado or HubSpot, or your project management tools such as Asana or Trello, or your email marketing platforms such as MailChimp, Infusionsoft, or Active Campaign, even Zoom. Okay, so all these big companies are likely to have come up to scratch with GDPR. The thing is, the bigger companies will have their own agreements. So they will have in their terms and conditions what is known as a processor agreement. That is their rights and obligations and duties as a processor, and how they will manage your private the information that they are processing on your behalf. The other, your VA may not have an agreement, and I can guarantee you he or she will not. But it's your responsibility to address this issue, excuse me, with your processor about what is it that they're doing in relation to the management of personal information in their in doing business with you. So you need to do some checking, because if you're using some obscure CRM, you need to make sure that if they are not located in the European Union, then where are they located? If they are located in the US, then are they registered with in the Privacy Shield list? And you can check online on the Privacy Shield website. It's a register, and you do a search to see if the company that you know is located in the US is actually registered. If they are, then they are GDPR compliant. Now, if they're not in the US, excuse me, and they're not in the European Union, and they're somewhere else in the world, you need to check if they have a finding of adequacy, so that the GDPR has considered that they are adequate in their practices in relation to the collection and processing of private and personal information. Interestingly, Australia is not on that list, and that's a whole nother live. What you need to know is that if they are not on that list, then you do need to have certain clauses in your privacy policy that cover that situation, because you do need to get explicit consent from each user for you to use that processor to process information that you've collected from the data, from the website user, or the data user, or the data owner. So make a list of all your processors, find out their location, see what their level of security is. If they're within the EU, it's fine. If they're within the US and they're part of the Privacy Shield, it's fine. If they're not in either of those and they're somewhere else in the world, then you need to have those other clauses in your policy. So that is why the privacy policy, as it stands now, is vastly different from that which which you may have been using over the last few years. So make sure that the processor agreement is contained in the documentation or the terms of use of the CRM, of the email marketing platform that you're using. And if you're using a smaller provider, a marketing agency or a VA, ensure that in your terms of use, in your terms of engagement, that the issue of privacy and the management of the information that they're processing on your behalf is addressed. And then finally, once you've done that, make sure that you keep a current list of everything that's going on. So that's about it that I want to cover for this live. The privacy, the GDPR now makes for a framework for all of us to be very mindful and vigilant about how information is collected and processed. It is a really, in time, it'll become like an integral part of business. As soon as you start business, privacy should be one of your first concerns about how you're going to be managing people's information. It's kind of a little bit unprecedented, but the way information is collected across the internet now has made all of us quite vulnerable. That's it for today. If you want to talk to me at all about any of what I've discussed in this Facebook Live, please do. You can message me or comment. If I have released templates that are GDPR compliant, and the link to the templates is in the comments, and I invite you to visit the shop and have a look, and if you haven't got a compliant template, consider getting one and at least sorting out that part of your business. Have a great week. And I'll see you next week. Bye for now.